discuss the implications of the Supreme Court's judgment on states. Well, this is Plus Politics, and I am Mary Anoko. As we count down to the 2023 governorship elections in Lagos State, there is renewed optimism in the camp of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, as to the possibility of breaking the 23-year-old grip of the ruling All Progressive Party, All Progressive Congress, APC. Now, a chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, Prince Usman Shodikbe Dosomu, had said the elders of the Lagos State chapter of the party are now reconciled and are working in lockstep to ensure PDP wins the state and forms the next government come 2023. Well, joining us to discuss this is the aspiring Lagos State Publicity Secretary in the People's Democratic Party, Demola Olariwaju. Thank you so much, Mr. Olariwaju, for joining us.
Thank you, Marianne. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Great. Let's start with, the fact that there's been a 23-year-long grip of the APC. What's caused that certainty within the PDP now, to say, well, we're certain that we're going to break that 23-year-old grip on Lagos State and, of course, take over? What's the level of preparedness? What makes you think that you're strong and ready to change the course of things?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I think the confidence stems from the fact that we think that the people are ready to break the yoke of the APC and the ruling cabal in Lagos State. No political party has any magic formula of winning elections by its own self. It always depends on the resolve of the people in that particular society. And a lot of signs, in the past few years indicate to us that people in Lagos are quite ready to throw off the chains and the shackles of the ruling cabal in Lagos State. And so that's where our confidence stems from. The motto of our party is power to the people, and we believe that the people of Lagos State are ready to take power using, the People's Democratic Party as the vehicle for that process. And so that's where our confidence stems from. In terms of preparedness as a political party, Prince Usman Shodikbe, alluded to that by what he was alluding to, rather, is the fact that the process heading into the Congress at the state level for the People's Democratic Party, it's coming to a conclusion. And what is going on is the elders of the party from various different tendencies, various beliefs, they are all united in saying that, look, we want to have an executive that will lead a state working committee that will lead the party rightly and prepare and position the party for the 2023 election. So it's a two-pronged confidence. Number one is the fact that we are confident from all the signs that we've seen so far that Lagosians are ready to throw away the shackles of the APC in Lagos State. And number two is the fact that the People's Democratic Party in Lagos State is showing serious signs of unity heading into the state Congress, which didn't used to happen before. So yes, so those are the two reasons why we are very confident, Mary.
Let's look at the Congress that you're talking about, because a lot of people are looking at that Congress. In fact, many people will be looking at the outcome of that Congress to determine how ready you are, how serious the PDP is about, turning the tide. But we also see that there are lots of, every political party does have big wigs and the ones who somewhat are strong men within the party. What should people expect as the outcome of the Congress come next month? I think it's next month. What should we be looking forward to?
Well, the Congress was just moved till next week, Wednesday, to allow more time for thorough, discussions, consultations, so that we can have a process that everyone buys into. What we expect, or what we believe people should look forward to, is that PDP in Lagos will come up with a set of people who, at the helm of its affairs, people who are not just experienced in political party management, but people who understand the aspiration of Lagosians, people who understand that Lagosians are quite ready to upturn the government, vote out the government, but that, that must be done through the political process, which is what PDP is trying to get itself prepared for. PDP in Lagos over time has always tried, to dislodge the APC, as various forms which it has, various names which it has taken on. But we've not been quite successful because we've never had a match of those two factors I mentioned earlier on, people being ready to take over government and then a political vehicle that is ready to harness the desires of those people. So we believe that, the Congress is going to see people who understand the political party and people who understand exactly what it is that Lagosians want to see in government. We have ideas that coincide or that match exactly the aspirations of the people of Lagos State. And so from next week Wednesday after the Congress, I am very confident that the leadership that would emerge of the People's Democratic Party in Lagos State is going to be a leadership that the people of Lagos State can identify with, and especially young people in Lagos State, because some of us believe that those young people in Lagos State are pivotal to any political process. And my aspiration, someone like me, coming out as State Publicity Secretary, is because I want to engage more with the public, especially with young people across all social media, so that we can jointly harness those two forces I mentioned, the people on one hand and then the party. And that is how we'll be able to deliver what I alluded to earlier on, which is the power to the people.
I'm going to come to the issue of your aspirations later, but let's talk about playing opposition. How well do you think the PDP as a party in Lagos State has played opposition politics? Some would say that your opposition is almost non-existent. Some others will say, well, you have tried. But you, as an insider, how well do you think that you've been able to speak up on the things that you think are not going right in Lagos, that you are saying you want to, put straight? Do you think that you can score yourself at least 50 or 100% in terms of playing opposition politics in Lagos?
Well, for me, I'm not, and I smile because this is something that, has, it causes a bit of ruckus on social media, but it's a position that I've consistently maintained, that I am not particularly a fan of opposition politics, especially in the presidential system. In the presidential system, you have a government, but then you also have various governments at various levels. So we can rightly say that the PDP is opposition in Lagos State. But then again, you have a PDP government as close by as Oyo State here. You have a PDP government as close by as Rivers State, and these are governments that are performing. So for me, I see it more like the People's Democratic Party in Lagos State needs to highlight the flaws of the All Progressive Congress. Then again, we must also show the people of Lagos what they would benefit by being part of the PDP family, the kind of governance that they will see. In other words, when you look at a state like Oyo State and you look at the transformation that is going on there under the leadership of Governor Seyi Makinde, you should be able to use that as a selling point in Lagos State and say, look, if you also want this kind of development in Lagos State, if you also want to see this kind of innovation, if you also want to see this kind of cutting-edge ideas, then you should be a part of the People's Democratic Party. So, so it's a double thing again.
It is necessary. Where is the place of creating some form of checks and balances? Because you see, the truth is, it's very difficult for governments in Nigeria to check and balance themselves. Shouldn't that be the job of the opposition?
The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and most constitutions in the world generally place the burden of checks and balances on one, the legislature, on the media, on civil society. The duty of political parties is to win elections. Now, when political parties consider that playing the role of opposition is advantageous to their goal of winning elections, then they play it. You see, what happened in Nigeria is that in the First Republic, we practiced a parliamentary system of government. In a parliamentary system of government, such as being practiced in Britain, you have the government. You have the government. There's actually someone called the leader of government business, and then you have the opposition political party, and you have someone called the leader of opposition, which in the First Republic in Nigeria, that position of opposition was occupied by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. But in the Second Republic, we moved to the presidential system, away from the parliamentary system. In the presidential system, such as being practiced in America, you don't have the Democrats referring to themselves as opposition to the Republicans. What happened in Nigeria was that the All Progressive Congress, from 2011 particularly, decided that they were going to unleash such vile politics within the Nigerian polity, and they had to hide it under the tag of opposition. And so they have come to define what Nigerians expect from an opposition, which is that, you call people names, you make outlandish statements, and even when the government in power...
But again, calling out an ill or a misstep in a government that is in power, whether you be civil society or a political party that's not necessarily in government, is that supposedly vile? Should it be vile? Are there not better ways to go about it? And should we totally shoot down the idea because you think that it is not constitutional for political parties?
No. I'm referring specifically to the idea of what people expect from an opposition party. The name calling, the bitterness, the bile, all that goes on with it. Some of us are not attuned to playing that kind of politics. We will intelligently deconstruct the governance in Lagos State. We will intelligently show how the APC has systematically since 1999, 24 years by 2023, we will show how they have put Lagos State on a downward trajectory by presenting gubernatorial candidates who do not understand the spirit of Lagos, which is business, by presenting people who have never led any business successfully, and then you want them to be governors of a state like Lagos State. That is why Lagos State has been on the decline. So we will show these things, but we will not do it without bile. If that's what you want as an opposition, then, I believe that from next week, Wednesday, Nigerians will see that kind of thing. But we will not be doing the kind of thing that APC does. We will show it in a way that people will see glaringly, and even those who are in APC themselves will be convinced that the alternative party, PDP, is better at the helm of affairs in Lagos State and even at the federal level. So for me, it is very clear. We will highlight the flaws of the government. We will continue to talk about them. Just last month in January, many chieftains of the political party of PDP in Lagos State pointed out, the increments of 400 billion naira in the budget by the Lagos State government. But again, it is something that cannot be done alone by the political party. The political party can speak, but we need partners in the media, we need partners in the civil society, we need ordinary Lagosians themselves also to see these issues and to speak about these issues with us. I mean, PDP was trying, I remember Dr. Alido Sumu, one of the frontline PDP members, was releasing statements about it. Our leader, Chief Bode George, also spoke about it. Several of our party chiefs spoke about it, trying to make an issue out of it. But Lagosians themselves must also buy into that agenda and realize that what we are doing is not necessarily playing opposition for the sake of it. What we are doing is highlighting the flaws of the ruling party in Lagos State for the benefit of all Lagosians. That's what we will be doing. Okay.
Let's talk about the last local government elections that took place here in Lagos State. The PDP managed to get a handful of seats here and there. How do you intend to win all of Lagos in 2023 if you're not even able to win at the local level, even for councillorship positions? What does this say about the stretch and the structure of the PDP, or how relatable the PDP as a party is to people at the lowest level? And I always, talk about those people or refer to them as those who need government the most. I mean, yes, the state governor is the state governor, but then those at our local government levels are the people who need the government the most.
Well, local government elections are overseen by PlusTvAfrica, which is basically an agency of the state. And most times we know how those things go.
How do they go?
We've had situations before. We've had situations before in 2011, when the People's Democratic Party won a seat at Etiosa. It was announced by the EO on the field, and by the time they got to the center, they had changed it and deprived the PDP candidate of his victory. The result was openly announced, So because the agency is essentially controlled by the state government, and so who controls the state government controls that election. So I think, that might not be a fair measurement of the preparedness of the People's Democratic Party. Because, what we are hoping to effect is a change that will happen at the state level in an election that will be monitored by the Independent National Electoral Commission, which we hope this time around will be absolutely impartial and will, deliver an election that meets with the aspiration of the people. But then again, like I want to emphasize and reiterate again, it's not just about the People's Democratic Party. There are many political parties registered with INEC to contest elections, and those parties are all there. But the people themselves, I strongly believe, and we as a political party, we believe that the people of Lagos are ready to effect that change in 2023. And we are confident that we will see record turnout even higher than the 2015 election. Because you can see the signs there. You see a younger generation, clamoring for things. You see, and this was expressed through the NSAS movement. Young people are eager, to see better governance being delivered to them. And so, what we will try to do is to harness those forces from the young people and then provide a political vehicle that will be able to deliver in line with the aspirations of those people. So it's not just about the People's Democratic Party. It is about the People's Democratic Party positioning itself as the political vehicle that will deliver in line with the aspiration of the people of Lagos State. And we are confident that in 2023, that will happen.
All right, let's talk about something that I noticed. Early this month, your party petitioned the Inspector General of Police and the Governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, over the voter registration suppression in Etiosa East. Now, you talked about harassment, intimidation, vulnerable citizens. Your party alleges that thugs by the LCDA chairman were responsible for this. How did you arrive at this conclusion?
Well, those who live in that locality must have studied the situation and observed. There are things that you see with your own eyes. I wasn't there personally, and I wasn't the one who issued that statement. But the people who witnessed it, made us understand the situation that is going on there, and hence that petition. They have been willing, to put that on record. Basically, it's one thing to come on air and make allegations. It's another thing to actually write a petition to the Inspector General of Police and then to the Lagos State Governor also. What we should do now, or what should happen now, is that pressure should be put on the IG and the Lagos State Governor to respond to the issues in that petition. It was raised formally, names were put out there, invite the person for a discussion. That is where it should start from. And again, I'm personally not surprised, and I don't think you should be surprised too, Mary, and anyone who followed the trend in the last election in 2019, where during the presidential election in Lagos State, you had a situation where thugs were attacking people of a certain ethnicity because they felt those people were going to vote for the People's Democratic Party. It happened around the Okota area, it happened in Surulere area also. We saw those things happen. So it is synonymous with what the APC does. Unleashing thugs against people is synonymous with what the APC does. Look,
but the APC had a response. I'd like to read it out to you. I'd like to quote them directly. In a reaction from the APC, they said, and I quote, "It is a localized issue and it has not been brought to our notice or the notice of the State Secretariat, but when it is done, they will deal with it." So the APC is saying no such thing has been reported, so they do not know anything about it.
You just mentioned that a petition was duly submitted, and put out in the media space, and also put with the IG, when names were mentioned specifically, and then the APC says it is not aware, that's only acting in line with what is becoming the ideology of their political party, where they are not aware of these things, and they want to live in bliss and in ignorance. But you see, since 1999, votes in Lagos State have continually been on the decline. The last time we had high votes in Lagos State was in 2011, was in 2011, yes, 2011 and 2015, where it came to a peak. In 2019, it went on the decline. We discovered that if you look at those voting results, the truth is the APC does not want the voter base to expand. It doesn't want more people voting in Lagos State.
How do you mean?
The more people vote, and the APC has a consistent they've always had a consistent range of figures that they score in elections, always 800,000 and 900,000. The only time it went higher was the time Raji Fashola was running for a second term. That was when it went above 1 million. Now, if you understand how the APC itself operates, young people are not captured adequately in Lagos State. If you look at Lagos State, you have a vibrant young population, but
is that the fault of the APC or the fault of the young people not willingly wanting to be captured? Because it's one thing to say blame a political party, but how many young people really show up at the polls when on election day?
We had a president in this country at some point in 2011. We had a president who deliberately went after the young vote. Many young people voted for the first time in 2011 because of the then president who was on the PDP platform. Those young people came into politics and they were so disgruntled with the system that they ended up removing that person. Okay? So what you usually have is this. Politicians generally like to keep their voter base, they like to keep it simple, they like to keep it safe. They don't want too many people coming into the political process. But some of us are here to break that. We are here to break down those doors and say basically let more people come into the vote. The consistent trajectory, and it doesn't happen anywhere else in the developed world. The constant trajectory is that more and more people turn out to vote year after year. But what happens in Lagos is it's actually declining. And that's a commentary on the ruling.
Is that really just a Lagos State problem or a nationwide problem?
I mean, it's both. In 2011, you had more people coming out, more people than in 2007. In 2015, you had more people coming out. In 2019, there was a decline because people felt that their votes would not count. Where people come out to vote and a ruling party decides to use the powers of the state to go after people, send thugs after voters, disrupt the voting process, you are discouraging people from voting. So you see, it's more of a systemic thing. That voter suppression issue, it's more of a systemic thing, and that's why PDP was raising the alarm, as far as the CIOSA was concerned. That look, there is a deliberate voter suppression system. And again, for those of us who care about Lagos State, we see it as a dangerous trend because in the last presidential election, Mary, Borno State had just about 50,000 voters less than Lagos State. Lagos State used to be regular, one of the top 3 voter turnout states all across the country. In the last 2019 election, Borno State, where there was a bomb blast, turned out just about 50,000 votes less than Lagos, which is a dangerous trend. But it shows you that what is going on in Lagos State is not fair to the interest of Lagosians. It's not fair to the interest of the people of Lagos, and it is inimical to the purposes of democracy. So for me, this voter suppression issue is something that really needs to be talked about, and we will continue to talk about it going forward. All
right. Lastly, before I wrap up, because we're almost out of time, Lagos for Lagos, we hear, has moved from the APC into the PDP. In fact, the leader of that group, Olajide Adediran, had said that he joining the party was to resurrect the PDP, to win elections. Does this pretend that Lagos for Lagos is what the PDP has been missing in time past, or this is what the PDP needs to win the elections come 2023? Now, he's also aspiring to be a Lagos State governorship aspirant or candidate for the PDP. Will this not ruffle the feathers of those who have already been in the party that may also be nursing the same kinds of ambition?
Well, I mean, any politician who's not ready for conflict or who's not ready for a clash of aspirations is not ready for politics. In politics, you have to always be ready to test your aspiration in the field. And I think, all our politicians in the People's Democratic Party, especially those who are contesting for governor, are ready to meet with anyone in the field. Having said that, I think, Dr. Jide Adediran's defection from the APC to the PDP is a sign of a third factor. I mentioned two factors earlier on, but now you've stumbled on what I can call the third one. The first was the people, the second was the party, and then the third is the ruling party itself. Dr. Jide Adediran's movement from the APC to the PDP is a sign of growing discontent within the All Progressive Congress. He's just the only one who is young and vibrant enough, who is foresighted enough to, jump ship from the APC, seeing what the APC has become in Lagos State. He's the one who's young and vibrant enough to defect to the People's Democratic Party. And we commend him. I mean, welcome him wholeheartedly. He has also said very clearly, and that's talking about Jando himself, Dr. Abdulaziz Olajidade. He has also said clearly that he's in this party to stay. He's going to vie for the ticket. We've also explained, that, People's Democratic Party is not a party of godfathers. It's not a party where one person will sit in his house and determine who becomes the gubernatorial candidate. You are going to go to the field, delegates will cast their vote, and eventually you would, if you met the flag bearer, then so be it. And he has said he's ready to submit himself, to the democratic process within the People's Democratic Party. So he is welcome. But for me, it is a sign that the third factor, in winning elections is falling into place. The first is that the people are ready. The second is that the party is ready. And the third is that the ruling cabal is finally breaking down from the inside. So for us, it's a positive sign.
Well, I want to say thank you. Demola Olariwaju he's aspiring to be the Lagos State Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you very much, Miriam. The pleasure is mine.
All right. Well, thank you all for staying with us. We'll take a short break now. And when we return, we'll look at the issue of the Executive Order number 10 and the Supreme Court's decision to nullify President Buhari's executive order. Stay with us.
The president 70% in the fight against corruption. You see, fighting corruption is not a tea party. It's a difficult task for anybody in any country of the world, no matter how powerful, no matter how developed the countries are. Corruption can be very tricky when it comes to avoiding the long arm of the law. And you also know that corruption crimes are not committed in the open. And that means that a lot of efforts will have to be put in place to trace the evidence of corruption.
I must tell you that originally, and for some time, I've always believed in competency as opposed to zoning. In other words, let's look for somebody who is able to deliver the goods. But in recent times, as a result of so many acts of injustice in the land and a lot of agitation in the land, I'm beginning to think, seriously speaking, that might appear to be one of the ways to address the tension in the country presently. Let me confess to you that while I was the National Legal Advisor of the party and a member of the National Working Committee and the Executive Council of that party, the president had always resisted invitation to be domineering in terms of party affairs as much as possible. But as since progresses, you discover that gradually people, in my view, are gradually bringing all pressure on him to take charge of the party. In other words, submitting the entire party to the president. And I think that led to what happened eventually in dismantling the earlier structure.
The reason why we seem to have insecurity all around the country and the reason why they are escalating is because certain persons in government and out of government are benefiting immensely. These people are the people we call conflict entrepreneurs. They make a lot of cash, a lot of capital out of conflict. So these are the individuals that are actually stoking up the violence in the Southeast particularly. And what we said is that it is the duty of the political elites from the Southeast region, because there are quite a number of people in government from that region of the country. They have not really done sufficient, they have not really shown sufficient commitments. The insecurity you have in the Southeast, basically, as we said, insecurity is being instigated by elements embedded in the federal government.
There was no reason for the suspension or the ban to have been imposed in the first place. As I have consistently maintained, it was a decision that was not warranted. It was a decision that was taken in bad faith. It was a decision that was taken on account of vengeance.
Now, last Friday, the Supreme Court of Nigeria dealt a major blow to a signature agenda of President Muhammadu Buhari when it shut down Executive Order Number 10, ceding financial autonomy to state legislature and judiciary. The Apex Court held that the Executive Order Number 10 was inconsistent with the 1999 Constitution and therefore unconstitutional, illegal, null and void, and of no effect whatsoever. Well, joining us to break this down is head attorney of Liborius Oshoma Chambers, Liborius Oshoma. Thank you very much, Mr. Oshoma, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, my sister.
Great. A lot of people do not necessarily understand the nitty-gritty of the Executive Order Number 10. So let's lay a basis, a foundation for it, and why Mr. President had to go this route.
Yeah, if you remember, Section 121, subsection 3 empowers the state legislature and the judiciary, the revenue that accrues to the state legislature and the judiciary to be charged directly to those arms of government. But unfortunately, that had not been so, as the section had been largely obeyed in breach by the state governors. So sometimes in 2021, the Judicial Union of Nigeria, Judicial Workers Union of Nigeria went on strike for about 80 days or so. And then in an attempt to resolve that issue, the president signed Executive Order Number 10 to instruct the Auditor General to withhold funds meant for state governments that refuse to comply with Section 121, subsection 3, which states that revenue that accrues to state legislature and judiciary should be charged directly to them. And so the governors went to court. In one breath, the governors were requesting that was ultraviolate the powers of the president. In another breath, asking the president and asking the court to order the government to pay them, I think about, was it 600 billion or so, that they have spent on a capital project for state judiciary. And so what the court simply said was, well, why the Executive Order Number 10 is ultraviolate the Constitution, the powers of the president, because it amounts to amending Section 121, subsection 3, also that you cannot deny the fact that the state judiciary are actually owned by the state. So any money expended by the state governor should not be refunded to them by the federal government. That's basically the nitty of the entire matter.
Now, a lot of people would say or refer to what the Supreme Court has done as a win for the governors. In fact, the governors may even be rejoicing. But in reality, is this a win for the governors? Because, again, the issue of autonomy for both the legislature and even local governments has been a front burner issue. We keep talking about it year in, year out. But the governments or the governors of these states continuously hold on to those finances. And the question is really, why?
Yeah, while Executive Order Number 10 was a good law, but also we should not forget that if such laws are allowed to stand and you have a dictator for a president, it might resort to the usage of executive orders to circumvent the provisions of the Constitution. And so that's why, for me, I would rather not say it's a win for the state governors, but rather a win for the Nigerian people that the Supreme Court stood firmly behind the letters and spirit of the Constitution. So what, the responsibility is now on the rest of us to ensure that the autonomy guaranteed by the Constitution to the judiciary and the state legislature should indeed be upheld. I had consistently charged the NBA in the short term to request for interpretation of the Constitution and on that section, and also push for my amendment of that section 121 to include a proviso, a penalty clause for state governors that refuse to comply with the sections empowering autonomy for state legislature and the judiciary. Because really, if we do not have an autonomous legislative arm of government like we do at the center, it will be a way of kissing goodbye to our democracy, a fledgling democracy. Because if you have, as you speak currently, the local governments are almost non-existent. And so if you have state legislature that are still, under the apron string of the state executive, and then they will have to kowtow to the state executive in everything that they do, then it truly means that democracy is at stake. And it behoves on all of us. Every hand must be on deck to ensure that, the autonomy, financial autonomy granted those arm of government is strictly complied with. And that's why, for me also, I think we should consistently look at our election and electionary mode to have a transparent process where the governors will not act as emperors or behemoths like we see them do, where state funds meant for other arm of government in their states are consistently held on to.
Someone asked a question some time ago that, if these people are at the whims and caprices of the governors of the state, and this has now happened, how do these workers, especially the legislative workers, seek redress? Because again, they need, like you have said, some form of autonomy. So what's next? Other than us saying, let's wait for the elections, how else do we deal with this issue? Or is it just going to become another local government autonomy issue that's just there, somewhere?
Yeah, that's why for me, like I said consistently, it is not something we all should just gloss over or go to sleep, because the Supreme Court has said, look, rightly so, Executive Order number 10, the President, you don't have the powers to use executive orders to amend or add to the sections of the Constitution. What we should now do, what the President attempted, though, to correct that anomaly, what the rest of us should now do, including, look, let me tell you, if not for that Josu strike, the Executive Order number 10 would have come into being. So I would also urge members of the workers at the state legislative offices, including Josu also, to go back and down to the moment they incapacitate both the state legislatures and the
judiciary.
State judiciary, the governors will have no other option but to sit down and ensure and insist that they all comply with the section 121 sub 3. And then also I want to challenge the bodies of state House of Assembly speakers. I expect that when they meet at that level, this should be an opportunity, this should be a heated topic for them also to rub minds on and insist that they remain on the corner. It's not something we should all gloss over. Because I can imagine, just imagine that funds meant for the state governors are withheld by the president, which is even what took them to court in the first place. The way things are presently, it is difficult for the State House of Assembly to even challenge their governors because they are.
I was about to say that because most of these legislatures that we have in states are almost rubber stamped. So who's going to call up the governor and say, we need these monies released? I mean, it's going to continue as a vicious cycle if something doesn't give. It
is the rest of us. So let me tell you, you and I are members of the civil society. All of us, it is those of us that this thing affects. Not necessarily the people who are benefiting from it financially. but the rest of us that insist on good governance, rule of law, and transparency, because we are the ones that will benefit in the long run. It is beholds on the rest of us to insist. Look, let me tell you one thing. These governors are afraid of us as a people. When we keep quiet, they think that all is well. But when we consistently talk about these things and keep them in the front burner, it also pushes them back to insist, to also want to implement this section of the Constitution. It is an impossibility for the State House of Assembly to insist on the autonomy, execution of autonomy for houses of assembly. They cannot achieve it. It is we, the ordinary people, and in some cases, the workers in the assembly, and then the workers in the courts that would be able to insist on the compliance with the provisions of the Constitution. And that's how democracy develops. Because if the rest of us sits down and says, because it doesn't affect us, and so we are not going to fight for that cause, gradually our laws will be observed and breached. This is a section of the Constitution that is being violated with impunity by state governors, and they still want houses of assembly to come cap in hand, begging for budget, begging for funds meant for the smooth running of the legislative arm of government. And what that means is that the governors have consistently violated our laws with impunity, and with the rest of us quietly, just keep quiet and do nothing about it. This is the government that is closest to us. And it behoves on us now that the court has said, look, Mr. President, you do not have the powers to amend the Constitution, by executive orders. You can do something else. It now behoves on us to go back as civil societies, members of trade union, to go back and insist that our governors cannot be higher than our laws. Our governors are not superior to our laws, because if we allow it today, tomorrow it might be something worse. The governors can even withhold salaries and allowances. Already they are withholding salaries and allowances of the ordinary workers. To the extent that now that when state government pays salaries, it is celebrated as an achievement. Before you know it, they are testing the water gradually with one feet. If they can withhold salaries, and now they are withholding finances meant for state assembly, meant for judiciary, before you know it, the rest of us, the government can just sit down the budget and say there is no money, so it's not going to pass the budget. Is it that at that time that we will wake up? Even as I speak to you, the local government of the council is almost non-existent. The state governors have made it comatose that in some cases they appoint administrators, sole administrators, to overrun the affairs of state local government in places where the Constitution has guaranteed a democratically elected government at the local level. It's because we are out quiet. We are poised on our rights.
So do we see a hashtag Occupy Government House anytime soon in different states? But then I would like to ask, are there any states that have complied with this section of the Constitution to make sure that monies are released to their legislatures? I'm wondering, are there any states that other states could emulate?
None so far.
Absolutely none.
When it comes to these issues, they are all uniform. They are all unanimous. So no state has granted autonomy to state house of assembly. You still see them running back to the governors as if they are beggars to the executive, and it is bad. It's very dangerous for our democracy. It is not something the rest of us should encourage. They were elected the same way that the state governor is elected, and so even though the state governor heads the way the state governor heads the executive arm is the same way the Speaker of the House of Assembly heads the legislative arm. Even though the state governor carries the burden of the government, but then he shouldn't treat other arms of government as though they are subservient to the executive or that they are servants to the executive. It's because the rest of us allowed it.
Well, I want to say thank you. Liberos Oshoma is the lead attorney at Liberos Oshoma Chambers. Thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all for staying with us. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, I will give you my take. Here's my take. Now, there are some who agree with the principle behind the Executive Order number 10 signed by the President, but There are also contending issues. The provision which empowers the Accountant General of the Federation to authorize the deduction from source is in the course of the Federation account. Allocation from the monies allocated to any state of the Federation that fails to release allocation meant for the state legislature and the state judiciary, in line with the financial autonomy guaranteed by Section 12, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, which we can say is contentious. But I'm thinking that in a country where the rule of law is supreme, there would have been no need whatsoever for an executive order to compel our governors to comply with the Constitution that they swore to uphold. So if the governors can blatantly refuse to obey the Constitution, as it is the case on this issue, how will these affected people seek redress? I really hope, if you ask me, that governors will not see this judgment as a victory for their lawlessness. We must keep this conversation alive. The law should and must apply to all and not some. I mean, our leaders can't keep picking and choosing the laws that they want to obey and the ones that they want to discard. I look forward to a time when accountability will be the watchword of Nigeria's leaders. Maybe then, just maybe then, Nigeria can truly work. I'm Mary Anukom, but before I leave you, I'd like to let you know what Nigerians are reacting to in terms of the government's plan, the federal government's plan, on imported bad fuel. Let's take a look, but have a good evening.
Well, the country needs fixing itself. So if they're using 200 and whatever billion to fix dirty fuel, how did it get into the country, number one? How did they do? They're not giving us names. To start with, they are not giving us names. Who imported?
So now what are we going to do about the corruption? We need to fight the corruption because from the top, the corruption started. So where then you cry for the fuel problem, I don't see anything big deal because when a time of election like this, you must have one thing for this country to hold it on it, to make sure they're going to take that one to punish other people.
There are so many other things federal government can do. I think the marketer who brought the contaminated fuel to the country, they are still there. They are the people that are supposed to be responsible for all this cleaning. Even all the engine that this adulterated fuel has spoiled, it is marketers, it is people, whether it is NNPC or marketers, private markets that brought the fuel to the country. These are the people that are supposed to clean all those things. The 201 billion naira the federal government said they want to use for this now, I don't think there's any, I don't think it makes any sense.
Okay, the federal government using the sum of 201 billion naira to clean up the dirty fuel importation, to me is a fraud. It's a fraud. It's a kind of trying to monopolize the oil sector.
It's a good thing. I support that government, but that money, say they go take and do that thing. Nobody say they don't talk and now, they go see what they take and do. They want to go, they want to do them. It's good.